The solar minimum, the low level of solar activity you have seen, is actually been the lowest possibly for over 70 years. And this report suggests that this was linked to the lack of warming seen over that period. But they suggest that when we go into the next solar maximum, which will happen in the next 5 years, that this will increase global temperatures faster than what we've projected from just greenhouse gases alone.
Well, joining us now from our Central London studio, climate change expert Jacqueline Carras. And we say expert, Jacqueline, how many other experts have been caught out by this?
I'm not sure that you can say they've been caught out. I mean, it's long been known that variability in solar output actually affects the climate system. And that's actually taken into account when we're looking forward into what future climate might look like.
Yeah, but is it difficult when we hear all these doom and gloom warnings about man-made carbon dioxide emissions and fossil fuels and so on heating up the atmosphere, that much more may be played by solar activity?
As I say, I mean, it's already being taken into account in future projections. There's no doubt that variations in solar activity affect sort of the temperatures we feel here on Earth. And as your representative from NASA was saying, that in recent years we've been through a low period of solar activity, close to a minimum, and that we're likely to go into a period of high level of solar activity over the next 5 years as we head towards a maximum. These things work on an 11-year cycle, and in the short term, variations in solar activity can certainly impact our climate. What they don't contradict is the long-term impacts of man-made climate change due to perhaps enhanced levels of greenhouse gases.
Right.
Here we're not talking about an 11-year cycle, we're talking about changes over a much longer period of time. So while it's conceivable that over the next few years solar variations will dominate sort of changes that we experience down here on Earth, if we're looking longer term, the accumulation of greenhouse gases could cause a much, much greater change, and that should be of concern to us all.
But of course, looking at a much longer period, there are those people that question the warming of the Earth before man had even set foot here, and saying, well, without the man-made activity, there was this huge change in temperature upon the Earth.
Certainly, even without mankind's activity, then the Earth's climate has switched between ice age to interglacial throughout time. And there are a number of different factors on that, including the sun's orbit, solar output, volcanic activity. There are a whole range of factors which contribute to that. But scientists with the UN-sponsored Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change have looked at this, assessed the future impact, taken that into account, and then looked at the potential human impact on climate, and this suggests that we'll get a much greater impact, a greater warming than we've actually experienced before due to human influence. But this, of course, comes on top of natural variability, which confuses the record slightly.
Let me just show you some of the damage that the sea can do, because where the sea defences have failed here and they've crumbled, the sea has encroached over 200 metres here. This all used to be land, but it's now formed this new sandy harbour. It looks beautiful, but it's far from idyllic for the residents here. 26 homes have been lost, and this is happening in other parts of the UK as well. And there's also a fear that erosion could destroy some ancient sites like Skara Brae in Orkney, from where my colleague Lorna Gordon now reports.
It's an ancient village of subterranean houses. Skara Brae, long abandoned by its inhabitants, is now popular with tourists seeking a glimpse of what Stone Age life was like.
Wow, that's fascinating. These are older than the pyramids.
Our Neolithic ancestors built their homes here low to protect them from the harsh Atlantic winds. And thousands of years ago, when the village emptied of people, it was hidden by grass and then drifting sands.
And the sand which covered this site for thousands of years also helped protect it. There are still stone dressers at the front of these houses, seats, a hearth, stone beds with storage above, and underground passages linking one house to another.
It is an archaeological treasure which was once far from shore, but is now just a few metres away from the sea. A carefully constructed wall has been built to defend it, because the storms here can be fierce.
If it comes in slightly this side, the headland protects Skara Brae, but if it comes in from here, it can come in directly, and it can hit the seawall with a huge amount of force. This particular bit of seawall was badly damaged by a storm about 3 years ago. There was a hole that you could almost walk into just underneath here.
Just along the bay, the ruins of an Iron Age village.
What looks like a pile of stones, but in fact this is the remains of a wall.
It's one of thousands of historic sites around Scotland, vulnerable to erosion from the sea.
Without a coastal defence, Skara Brae would be washed away in exactly the same way that this site is being washed away. This site at the moment looks quite stable, but a single storm can come in, undermine the sand, and all the stones here will come collapsing down.
Experts concede it's just not possible to save everything under threat, but they do want to preserve as much as they can from our past before coastal erosion means some historic sites are lost forever.
Well, let's talk a little bit more now about what's happening here in Haysborough. And I'm joined by Clive Stockton, who's from the Local Government Association National Coastal Group. And Clive, you're also a resident of Haysborough.
Indeed.
Just talk me through what's happened here behind us.
Well, essentially our late 1950s, 60s wooden revetment defences have come to the end of their life, or exceeded the end of their life, collapsed. And we see what's happened to the cliff line. You also see, however, some temporary defences which we put into delay.
So there was a row of bungalows here which have all crumbled away.
Indeed there was. There was a row of bungalows, there was another road, there was a car park, there were public toilets, there was a whole...
So you work for the Local Government Association. Why hasn't more been done to mend these defences and to save people's properties?
The reality of the situation is that in the last 20 years particularly, government policies based upon a cost-benefit analysis have essentially said for many coastal communities, but certainly smaller rural communities, that there is no justification for spending the kind of money that would be needed to defend these communities, given that the problem is likely to get worse with climate change.
And yet, Clive, if we look down the coast just that way, we can see Sea Palling, which has had new defences.
Indeed it has, and this is one of the problems we suffer from. Undoubtedly, Haysborough suffers from accelerated erosion, quite simply because it's an undefended area between hard defences.
Can I ask you about the compensation issue? Because the policy is not to offer compensation, although the government's now offering a few £1,000s potentially to help people with the costs of moving.
It's an issue which, at the end of the day, we've got to face up to, I believe. The government has a duty of care. We are one of the few countries in Europe that do not offer any kind of compensation if you lose your property to the sea. The issue is simply this: we have an all or nothing. If you unsuccessfully apply for funding to defend your coastline, that's the end of the story. You're left to fend for yourself. Ultimately, you lose everything you own. I don't believe that's social justice in the 21st century. I believe we need funding and policies which allow us to manage the consequences of not defending a coastline. Otherwise, we have a major social injustice.
OK, Clive Stockton, thank you very much indeed. Well, the residents that I've spoken to here are very angry indeed. They know that you can't stop erosion, but they would like some help to slow it down. The government says they do want to help people, but that it's simply not viable to build or fix defences in every location. Back to you.
Louisa, thanks very much indeed.